In progress.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Elaine Fagan, and welcome to today's women-focused webinar, Closing the Leadership Gap One Rung at a Time. It's fantastic that we have women from I, A, and B, along with our Big I sister associations from Georgia, Minnesota, and Nebraska joining us for this informative presentation. And it's certainly, I think it's easy for all of us to recognize that women are a driving force behind the success of the insurance industry. And today's webinar will offer practical insights into how we can support, develop, and encourage more women at all levels within an agency or company to create stronger pathways to leadership. And in my opinion, that's a great topic and a great thing to be talking about today. Before I introduce today's speaker, there are a few housekeeping details I want to review. First, because we do have a larger audience, all audio lines are muted and cameras are off. Second, if you have questions during the webinar, send them via the chat feature. Also, if you like, at any time during the presentation, the third housekeeping detail here is if you want to actively participate and voice your comment or question, by all means, please use the raise your hand feature. And as the webinar administrator, I'll unmute your audio. The good news, your camera remains turned off, so if you do not have to be in professional attire, you can be relaxed and comfy. The only thing we will hear is your lovely voice. The fourth and final item, and this will answer one of the questions that I saw in the chat already, is that yes, the webinar will be recorded for you to access via your association's website. So now I get to move on to the fun stuff about today's webinar. I'm really pleased to introduce Julie Webb, founder of JMW Collective, a leadership consulting practice, focused first on professional women. Julie is definitely on a mission to empower organizations and leaders to build thriving, resilient, and inclusive businesses that will stand the test of time. I personally have been fortunate to work with Julie in several capacities, including leading the women's breakfast discussion at a prior Young Agent conference that we hosted at Bear Creek. And also she teaches at the CIC level. And she has been scheduled for many of our CIC agency management institutes. I think I just also recently lined her up for a 2027 gig. So we do like having her around. Julie has 2 decades of incredibly diverse insurance industry experience under her belt, which certainly positions her to be well equipped to lead today's discussion. And I am confident that you're going to enjoy the time you spend with her today, and you will leave feeling empowered to pursue your leadership goals. Just a quick note for I, A, and B members in the audience, I did mention that Julie spoke at our Young Agent Conference Women's Breakfast. Our Young Agent Conference is taking place October 13th and 14th at the Wyndham Gettysburg Hotel. We are going to have the Women's Breakfast back on tap on day one. So if you want to attend, please mark your calendars if the program applies to you. With that said, let's get started. And so please join me in welcoming Julie. I should like to say stage, but in the world of virtual webinars, I'll say, please welcome me in welcome me in bringing Julie to the screen. There we go. It's all
Thank
you, Julie.
you.
Yep.
Thank you, Elaine. Thanks for the warm introduction. And it's great to see so many of you choosing to invest in yourselves today. And thank you for committing to closing the leadership gap, one rung at a time. In the chat, Elaine is going to be dropping a worksheet that you can download to follow along with. Or if you're not able to do that, just pull out a fresh piece of paper or your phone or your favorite notes app and follow along so that you have some strong takeaways from our time together. As Elaine said, please comment in the chat. I'm going to be inviting you to share. So please get that in a place where you can jump in and join the conversation. And we'd love to have someone come off mute. And as Elaine said, just share your beautiful voice with us if you have any questions or comments as we go throughout today's session. I want to start us off this afternoon. I guess it's not this morning anymore, with a moment of reflection. And here's what I want you to think about. I want you to think about a person who influenced the trajectory of your career. Maybe it was a manager, a colleague, a parent, a teacher, a mentor. Maybe it was someone who barely realized the impact they had on you. Do you have that person in mind? Next, I want you to think about a moment when someone saw something in you that you didn't see in yourself. A moment when someone gave you an opportunity you weren't completely sure you were ready for. Or maybe a moment when someone said your name in a room that you weren't. Maybe that person is on this webinar with you. If you're comfortable, I'd love for you to drop the name of that person in the chat and how they influenced your career. As you're dropping those in, I'll share, for me, some examples of that. So for me, that first person was a high school teacher who saw my potential before I did. She took me on a class trip to the University of Pittsburgh, where 4 years later, I would meet a second someone. And that second someone was a recruiter from Geico Insurance, who recognized my student leadership skills as skills that could be transferred to a leadership development program. And 4 years after that, there was another someone, a Geico VP who took a chance on a 26-year-old Julie and moved her from DC to Buffalo to start a new division for the company. I had never done that before, but he believed in my potential and promoted me anyway. Thank you all for sharing. Maya shared her grandpa, an agent for over 50 years, has been a huge mentor to her whole life. Madison said, my first insurance agent I ever worked for. He's still a mentor to this day, father figure in my life. And how special is this? Renee said, Katie Ship constantly makes me strive to be better in the industry. And what a small world. I know Katie, and she is a great mentor. So thanks for sharing that, Renee. Now think about this. What if that person hadn't been there? What if that moment never happened? Would your career look different today? I think for most of us, myself included, it would. Because here's the thing, careers don't happen in isolation. Now, don't get me wrong. I am a firm believer that it starts with us. We have to be intentional about our careers. We have to ask for what we want, and we have to be willing to take risks. And we need someone to give us an opportunity, someone who sees our potential, who invites us into the room, someone who takes a chance on us. But what happens when those opportunities aren't distributed equally? We find ourselves in a female-dominated industry. That's right, our industry is female-dominated. Women make up 59% of the workforce. But we find ourselves in a situation where only 22% of C-suite roles are held by women. Let's take a closer look. Here's some numbers for all my data loving friends and a picture of a woman who you may be familiar with. I'm pretty sure you're familiar with the term that she coined. In 1978, an HR executive, the woman on the screen named Marilyn Loden, participated in a panel discussion at the Women's Expo in New York City. And the expo was about women's career ambitions. So think about this time period, the late 70s. Well, much of the conversations that week revolved around the behavioral changes women should make in order to succeed. Marilyn argued that instead, the real issue was the structural barriers keeping them from the top. She stated there was an invisible glass ceiling. Have you heard of that before? Standing in the way of our aspirations and opportunities. And since then, the image of that glass ceiling sitting at the top of the corporate ladder has become a symbol of the obstacles that women face when reaching for the top rungs of leadership. Now, while Marilyn's concept of the glass ceiling being at the top of the corporate ladder is still relevant today, new research from McKinsey and Lean In's Women in the Workplace study, which you might be familiar with, shows that women are falling off the ladder much sooner than we originally thought. This research shows that, in fact, every rung on the corporate ladder is broken. However, it's that first rung that affects everything else beyond entry level. These findings became the foundation of the book, The Broken Rung, which you see here on the screen, and where we'll pull our learnings from today. But first, why does it matter? Well, let's start with the Great Wealth Transfer. Have you heard of this? A recent report from Cerulli Associates estimates that 124 trillion, that's trillion with a T, will be transferred through 2040. And 70% of that is expected to go to women. Think surviving spouses and younger generations. So very soon, women will control more money than ever before. Let's talk about the correlation between diverse executive teams and performance. McKinsey and Company found that businesses with gender diverse leadership are 27% more profitable and generate 19% more revenue from innovation. So lots of wealth being transferred into the hands of women. The Big I surveyed 500 women and found that 80% are responsible for the financial planning and decision-making in their households, including the purchasing of personal lines insurance. And additionally, 72% of women would be more inclined to purchase insurance if the policy offerings were presented by a woman. All right, so access to wealth, improved performance, and an increased close rate. I'm guessing I've got your attention, but I want to add a personal why. Since Marilyn, who we learned about on the last slide, coined that phrase almost 50 years ago, some progress has been made. Women have gone from representing 3 to 5% of the C-suite to 29%. Still hardly equitable, but progress nonetheless. Today, more than half HR leaders believe their organizations will reach gender parity within the next 10 years. But according to the United Nations, make sure you're sitting down for this, at the current rate of improvement, it will be 176 years, 176 years until we reach equal representation in management positions around the world. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't wait that long. I can't wait that long for me, for you, or for this little girl. Uh, on her first day of first grade, my daughter and I proudly filled out her first day of school chalkboard, which you can see here. Her favorite color was teal. Her favorite things were dance, dance, and more dance. Some things don't change. But when she got to when I grow up, I want to be, we didn't write ballerina or teacher or astronaut. Instead, we wrote insurance agent, as you can see here on the screen. I remember it like it was yesterday. Shortly before we completed that last square, she looked up at me and with big eyes, she said, "What do you do, mommy?" Now, let's be honest, an insurance agent isn't exactly the dream job you'd expect from a 6-year-old, but this little girl looked up to her mom, and her mom was an insurance agent. If only more girls and young women had examples of female leaders in our industry, maybe they could see themselves in those roles and we'd see that 29% rise to 50% in a shorter period than 176 years. So let's dive in and let's get a little curious. Here's what we're going to talk about today. How do we move the needle faster? How do we repair the broken rung? How do we get more women to the top? Well, we're first going to talk a little bit about what holds us back. We've got to know what our blind spots are. Then we're going to talk about how we could reframe our narrative, how we pay it forward, and then we're going to get really specific and talk about which rung you want to climb next. So let's start with a conversation around what holds us back. By now, we're all likely familiar with the 2014 study out of Hewlett Packard that found that men tend to apply for jobs when they are 60% qualified, whereas women only apply to those jobs if they're 100% qualified. Now, there's many reasons that this occurs, but one that stands out is something that's referred to as performance bias. And this bias leads to men being hired and promoted based on their future potential, while women are hired and promoted based on their past achievements. Speaking of biases, we all have them and face them. And the benevolent bias occurs when a manager avoids giving a challenging project to a new parent or a female colleague to spare them from the stress, which accidentally blocks their career growth. Or maybe we decide not to invite a busy coworker to an important meeting because we assume they're too overwhelmed, removing their chance to choose. How about the sponsorship gap? You've probably heard this before too. Women are over-mentored and under-sponsored. We get a lot of advice, but men get a lot of advocacy. So what does this look like? What does a sponsor actually do for us? Well, a sponsor shares your name and your specific qualifications in rooms that you're not in. You need a sponsor or 2 or 3. Now, before I introduce this concept of experience capital, I want you to type in the chat box how you might overcome these first 3 challenges, either for yourself or for your teammates. How could you help someone or yourself overcome the potential versus proof, the benevolent bias, or the sponsorship gap? Drop some responses in the question or the chat box for us. And Maria and Barb, thanks for sharing a couple more examples of mentors that you've had in your life. Some pretty cool stories in there. Hi, Lindsay. Lindsay shared, sure, becoming a mentor or even becoming a sponsor. So if you find yourself in meetings where maybe someone on your team or a colleague wasn't invited or doesn't find herself at the table, how can you share the good work that she's doing in those situations? Absolutely. How about the next time you think about inviting someone to a meeting or giving them a project and you think, oh, they were just telling me about how much they have going on at home. I don't know if I'm just going to do this myself. I don't want to bother this with them or bother them with this. Maybe we let them make that choice for themselves. Cassandra, thanks for sharing. She said, leveraging my role as a senior leader to curb bias displayed from other leaders. Yes. You know, men, women, we all have biases. And if we can find a polite, private way to point that out to people, sometimes they don't even realize they're doing it. And so if we can help them to recognize that and give them some tools to avoid it in the future, fantastic. Thanks for sharing that, Cassandra. Okay, let's talk about this concept of experience capital. Have you heard of it before? Experience capital is essentially the skills, relationships, and credibility that fuel upward mobility. So women, we often have the skills, we've got the resumes, the grades, etc., but we often lack access to the right experiences. Some examples of high value experiences include P&L ownership, leading cross-functional teams, managing a budget, making boardroom presentations, and sponsorship. And remember, women are over-mentored and under-sponsored. Sponsorship is one of the biggest drivers of experience capital. So let's talk about this experience capital and how you get it.
Julie,
So, yeah.
Julie, can you hear me? I just, let me get back here. I'm trying to get my cursor right back to the right screen. We have a raised hand from Marianne Morosco. So is it okay if we allow her to pipe in right now before you
Love
move
to
on
hear
to the
from,
next one?
I would love to hear from Marianne Morosco.
Yeah, so would I. Floor's yours, Marianne. Is it working? Uh-oh. Am I missing something, Marianne? Maybe you need to hang on. Are you getting an ask to unmute, Marianne? All right. Well, I'm going to go off of audio then, and I'll try to connect with Marianne. Maybe where I've given her the opportunity to allow to talk, so I'm not sure what's happening.
Okay, sounds good. Just interrupt anytime.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's what I want to know in the chat, and everyone can chime in on this. How long have you been doing your job? Drop a number in the chat. Okay, love it. 20, 25, 24, 21, 6, 11, 10, 22, 24, 12, 10. Look at all of this experience on here. Fantastic. 30 plus years. 43. Sandy, I think you win. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. All right. So we've got lots of tenure on the line. Let's look at these next questions. Have you led something cross-functional? Have you built relationships outside of your function? Have senior leaders seen you operate? Have you presented to executives? Have you owned a budget? How about, have you had P&L exposure to the profit and loss report for your company or agency? And have you led through ambiguity? So when you think about these questions, Barb says yes. Tierney said, this is my everyday, especially the ambiguity. I get that. What I would challenge you to think about as you look at these is, if you're Tierney and you say, yes, I've got lots of experience in leading through ambiguity. Great. Maybe I need to increase my visibility to executives or senior leaders. Or maybe I've gotten really siloed in my role and I haven't taken the opportunity to intentionally reach out to people working in different departments outside of my function. So I want you, when you think of your experience, when you think of your tenure, I want you to think of it in this form. Instead of how many years have I worked in the insurance industry, I want you to think about how much experience do I have in cross-functional work, in owning a budget and having exposure to a P&L. And then if I haven't had that exposure, who can get me that exposure? Because here's the thing about experience. Experience isn't just something you accumulate. It's often something someone gives you access to. And this is my mic drop moment. So if you're a manager or a supervisor, you are the gatekeeper of opportunity. So how can you open the door for someone and make the room that you open the door to more hospitable for them? Let me just dive in on that a little bit deeper. How can you open the door for someone and make the room more hospitable for them? So it's not just inviting someone to the meeting. It's inviting them to the meeting, sharing the agenda with them ahead of time, helping them prepare for the meeting, and then finding them a physical seat at the table. So how can you open the door for someone and make the room more hospitable for them? And if you're an individual contributor, is your supervisor giving you access to these opportunities? And if not, how can you advocate for yourself? All right, so now we know what is holding us back or what could be holding us back. We've got some examples of experience capital that we want to intentionally seek out. And now I want to talk to you a little bit about reframing your narrative. So let's look at these examples on the slide. And I love a good little phrase that can help me with my reframing. And so in this situation, I've used catch, challenge, and change. If you find yourself saying, I'm not ready yet, there's a job that's been posted, but I'm falling into that performance versus potential trap and thinking I've only got 50% of the requirements or the qualifications. I'm not going to apply for it. I'm not ready yet. How could we challenge that assumption and instead ask ourselves, what evidence says I need to be 100% ready? And then change your narrative to say, what could I learn by doing? What do I bring to this role? And what could I learn while I did it? So catch, challenge, change. Okay, here's the time for you to pull out your worksheet or jot down on a piece of paper your catch, challenge, and change reframe. So I want you to think about an opportunity you have at work right now. I want you to catch what you're telling yourself that might be standing in your way. And then I want you to challenge it. What question could help me see this differently? And then finally, I want you to answer the question, what will I do differently? How will I change? So catch, challenge, and change. And then I'd love if we have anybody who wants to share that in the chat, drop it in the chat, or if you want to come off mute, I think we've got that figured out. We'll make that possible for you. Great. Cassandra, thanks for jumping in. She said, focus on transferable skills. I love that. It's how I ended up in insurance. I briefly shared with you earlier. I, like so many of us, never planned to find myself in the insurance industry. But because I met a recruiter from the industry who recognized my leadership skills and said, hey, I think you could transfer those to the world of insurance, here I am 20 plus years later. So when you're looking at an opportunity, if you don't have the exact qualifications, I want you to think about what Cassandra is saying. What skills do I have that could transfer into this new role? And I'm going to give you a little exercise to help you with this. It's not on your handout and it's not in the slides, but it's something that I like to do in my workshops with companies and agencies. And it's called a milestone map. Give me a thumbs up if you've ever heard of this. It's a really cool activity because it really helps to build confidence in exactly what Cassandra is talking about. So here's what you do in a nutshell. You pick the time period of your career that you want to look back on, and then you plot moments of your career, high points, low points, everywhere in between. And then you find the common thread that goes throughout your milestone map. And often what you'll find is, wow, I didn't get that job, but I bounced back, applied for the next one, and got that position. That shows I have resilience. Or I was the one who led the transformation from AMS 360 to Epic. And boy, that was tough. But my organizational skills, my planning skills, my change management skills helped me get through that. So now my agency wants to implement an AI tool. I can do that. Sure, I've never done that exact thing before, but by looking at your milestone map, you can say, I have experience navigating through a change like that. Awesome. Okay. If anybody else has one to share, drop it in the chat. I'm going to give you some more examples here on the next slide. Let's look at some of these. So the catch might be, I don't have enough experience. The challenge could be, well, what experience could I gain from taking this opportunity? And then I could change by saying, I'll ask what I could learn by stepping into it. How about this third one? Someone will notice my work. There's a great book, in addition to The Broken Rung, called How Women Rise. And one of the pitfalls that this book talks about that women fall into that holds us back is saying someone will just notice how hard I'm working. I want you to challenge that thought if you have it and ask yourself, who needs to know about my impact? And then make my impact visible to the people who can influence my next opportunity. How about we talked about mentoring and sponsoring? I need a mentor. How about we challenge that with who could actively sponsor me? And then identify someone who can advocate for you. And be really specific about it. Don't just assume that they know what you're good at and what your qualifications are. Write it down for them. Practice telling them that. Have them say it to you so that you can make sure that when they're in that room that you're not in, they're saying what you want them to say. And then how about this one? I don't want to take on more. Ask yourself, is this a strategic experience or just more work? And then prioritize opportunities that build experience capital. I didn't throw it on this slide because I know you've heard it before, But another thing that holds us back is a lot of the invisible office work that we do. So if you don't want to take on more and that thing you're being asked to take on is planning the office party, it's okay to say no and redirect that time to something that falls on that experience capital list. So I'm going to prioritize my opportunities and build experience capital and not just add workload. Anybody think of anything else as we were going through the catch, challenge, change exercise? If you think of something, drop it in the chat for us. All right, we're going to go back to where we started and we're going to reflect on our leadership journey. I want you to go back to that person or that moment that you wrote down before or you thought of before, or some of you even were kind enough to share it in the chat. And now that we've given some more language to things that sponsors and advocates can do for us, I want you to get really specific about that person or that moment. What did they actually give you? So in my first example that I gave you, I mentioned a high school teacher. And she gave me the opportunity at the time, and if I have any fellow future business leader of America alum, let me know in the chat. At the time, she invited me to be a part of that organization. And it's that organization that led me to the University of Pittsburgh. And you heard the rest of the story, right? So what did they actually give you? She gave me an opportunity to compete. Lindsay said time and knowledge. Thanks, Lindsay. Time is our most valuable resource. And so when somebody gives it to you, take advantage of it. How about this? What did they not do? And that's kind of a strange question. But if you think about some of the biases that we talked about, the benevolent bias, did they try to protect you? Or were they really clear with the feedback that you needed to hear? I have a post-it note behind my desk that says clear is kind. I'm pretty sure I stole that from Brene Brown. But for me, when I need to give difficult feedback to someone, I remind myself of that. So what did they not do? What did they see in you that you couldn't yet see? What risk did they take on you? I shared with you the example. I went to work for Geico right out of college. I was in a leadership development program, learned a lot about insurance, learned a lot about leadership. And about 4 years into my career there, was raised my hand. So there's the intentionality in your career, right? Raised my hand and said, hey, I hear we're starting this new division in this new location. I'd like to be a part of that. And the much more senior VP said, okay, I see what you bring to the table. I see your potential. I'm gonna risk it. I'm gonna take a chance on you. And I got a really cool opportunity to start a division from the inside. And as an entrepreneur in that role, I learned things that I carry with me now as an entrepreneur. Now I want you to think about who is the woman in your organization right now? Who is she that reminds you of yourself at that moment in your career? I want you to take a moment and write her name down. And then I want to invite you to think about what would happen if you stopped waiting for her to be ready. Do you catch yourself saying that? Oh, she just needs, a year or two more. Well, she might, but are we giving her that experience capital that she needs in that year or two more? Or what if we started to throw her a couple of opportunities, a couple of projects, just to see if she can figure it out? She's not 100% ready. That's okay. If you have any examples of that, drop it in the chat. Who has surprised you? Who have you given a project to and they weren't 100% ready? But man, they came back with the best outcome for you. Have you ever done that? So if you have something to share, drop it in the chat, but at least for yourself, write down the name of that woman. And maybe she's not even in your agency or your company. Maybe she's in your network. We're going to talk a little bit about your network here on the next couple of slides. But maybe there's an opportunity for someone outside of your company. Be intentional. I think it was Barb who said, put in the genuine effort and be inclusive. Couldn't have said that better myself, Barb. Okay. So which rung will you climb next? I've got a couple of options here for you. And if you're following along on your handout, it's on the second page. You can jot some notes down about what is it that you are going to do differently. Elaine, would you be able to drop the PDF in the chat box again in case folks came on after we included that? And we'll make sure that we share it in the follow-up as well. Thanks, Elaine. So I've got 4 suggestions here for you. The first one is around finding a sponsor. Who needs to know your aspirations and how to advocate for you? Again, we have to be specific. So if this is a takeaway for you, I want you to write down the name of one person who might just be a connection right now. You know that person. They've seen your work. You've said hello in the hallway. You've gone for coffee. But does that person know your aspirations? Do they know what the next rung is for you? Is it stepping into a supervisor role, a manager role, a director role? Be specific. And then do they know exactly what qualifies you for that role? Do they know the good work that you've been doing? What you contribute to the organization that only you can do? Be specific. Or maybe it's visibility. Where do you need to be seen? And this can get tricky because I bet, as is evidenced by the format we're on today, that some portion of you are either fully remote or working in a hybrid format. And when we're working remotely or we're not in the office every day, and please don't take this the wrong way, in 2026, we have to be flexible with our workforce, and I'm a big promoter of a hybrid workforce. But when we are remote or in a hybrid fashion, we have to be really intentional about our visibility. And statistics tell us that more often than not, women are working in a flexible arrangement like that. And when we're out of sight, we're out of mind. So I know that option wasn't available today because of the number of folks we have online. But when you're on a Zoom call, make sure you're visible. When you're in the office, don't just go hide in a cubicle and do the work you could have done at home. Be intentional about the people you want to see. They say when you're building a network, it's all about who you know, but it's really all about who knows you. So think about how you can be more visible in your organization. We talked about experience capital, but what experience or opportunity could make your next move possible? Remember, we talked about working cross-functionally. We talked about having access to a budget. I do a lot of coaching and I hear from my clients, I know I have a budget, but I don't know that I've ever seen it. Or maybe, I don't know how I directly impact the budget that I'm a part of. So if you're a leader who manages a budget, share that information as much as you can with your teams. And if you're an individual contributor, be curious about that. Think about profit and loss statements. Elaine mentioned that I teach one of the CIC classes, agency management, and we talk about budgets and profit and loss statements and income statements. And if you don't know how those work and how what you do impacts that in your agency or your company, get curious about it. That would be an opportunity to find a mentor who can help you understand that. Because here's the thing. This doesn't just happen at entry level and mid level. Often, when women are getting promoted into the C suite, they're getting promoted into CHRO roles, Chief Human Resource Officer, culture, people development. They're not getting promoted into roles like COO or CFO. And so, at any stage in our career, we have to be diligent about understanding those metrics and taking responsibility for them if we can. And Marianne, thanks for jumping in. Just to go back to visibility, yeah, if we're going to be present on Zoom, we got to be professional. And it's not only what you're wearing, but what's in your background, and be intentional about that. Okay, how about this last one? Steady the rung. So whose name are you going to say in a room she isn't in? How do we carry this forward? So I'd love for you to write down the name of one woman that you want to elevate this week, next week, before the end of the month. So my question for you is, which rung will you climb next? And who's going to help you climb it? So let's just reflect for a little bit. At the beginning of our time together, I asked you to think about a person who changed the trajectory of your career. And remember, we said, what would your career look like if that person hadn't intervened? Maybe they saw something in you before you saw it. Maybe they opened a door. Maybe they put your name in a room that you weren't in, gave you an opportunity before you were completely ready. I want you to remember how that felt, not just what it did for you, but how it felt. Because somewhere in your organization right now, there's another woman who's waiting for that moment. She may be talented, she may be ambitious, she may be doing everything right. But she might also be thinking, I'm not ready. I need more experience, or maybe surely someone will just notice me. And that's really where we have a choice. We can wait for her to be ready, or we can help her be ready by giving her the opportunity to grow. Because that's how we close the gap. Not one woman climbing the ladder alone. It's one rung at a time, one opportunity at a time, one person willing to open a door at a time. So here's my challenge for you. What's your next rung? What experience do you need? What conversation do you need to have? And what room do you need to be in? What opportunity are you ready for? Or maybe not, that you'll still raise your hand for? And whose rung can you steady? Because here's the thing, you don't have to be the CEO to change the trajectory of someone's career. You can do it with an introduction, with an invitation, a recommendation, a stretch assignment, or as Lindsay said, just 5 minutes of your time. And here's the thing, you don't have to go it alone. So I spend all my days now doing exactly this, helping women through leadership coaching, through workshops like this and keynotes. I often tout, again, I think I borrowed this from my friend Renee, leadership is the one profession where we expect a really high level of performance, but coaching of leaders is not the norm. Think about that. Athletes, artists, singers, musicians, they all have coaches. They're expected to perform at a high level, just like us. It's normal for them to have coaches, but for some reason, it's not normal for us. So if you need a coach to help you climb the ladder, I could be that person for you. And then the last thing I'll share, and I know there's some my network friends on the line, which is always great to see, is that one of my favorite things to do is to facilitate peer groups for women in insurance. And we do that through my network. And so if you're a my network friend, say hello in the chat. Always good to see your name on the participant list. But this is an opportunity for you to come together with other women in our industry to talk about these very things. We're getting ready to kick off season 12, and it's all about, drumroll please, productive conflict. Anybody get a little sweaty when I say those two words? We're going to dive in with both feet and help you manage that, lead through productive conflict in this next season of my network. But whether you choose to engage with me, with the great team at IA&B, you know that you don't have to climb this ladder alone. So reach out, look at who's in your network, and as I like to say, build your network before you need it. I'd love to pass it back over to Elaine in just a second. We're almost at the top of the hour. But before we do that, if anybody has any questions or comments, I'd love for you to put that in the chat or raise your hand for Elaine. I always like to leave time for questions. No question is a silly question. This is your opportunity to ask. And if you have the question, chances are somebody else has it too. And if we don't have any questions, I'll pass it off to Elaine, but I will stay on for a few minutes if anyone wants to ask a question in a more private setting. All right, we do have a question. So can you reiterate the experience capital for someone that is not ready yet? So I hope I'm understanding your question correctly, Marianne. But when we think about experience capital, often we have to create opportunities or give access to experience capital. So if we have someone, as an example, who wants to step into, maybe they're an underwriter and they want to step into a territory manager role. Maybe they don't have, maybe a gap for them is sales experience. So they say, well, I'm not ready yet. So how can we give them some sales experience in a safe environment? Can they shadow someone? Can they maybe take on a smaller agency in a territory manager-esque role to get a little more ready? Maybe we pair them up with a territory manager who felt the same way before he or she stepped into that role, and ask them to help that person realize some of the skills that they have that may not be, black and white sales skills that could transfer into that role. So I think it's when we think about experience capital, it's identifying the gaps and then giving someone access to experience that in a safe environment to get them a little more ready, remembering that they don't have to be 100% most of the time. Thanks for that question. And if you have a follow-up, just go ahead and drop it in the chat. Well, Elaine, I will pass it back over to you and just keep my eye on the chat in case any other questions come in.
All right. Thank you, Julie. That was a great session. I hope everyone enjoyed it. And Remember that today's webinar has been recorded, so it will be available if on your association's website if you want to review it or share it with someone who was unable to join us today during the live presentation. I also just want to remind you that we have our last webinar of 2026 lined up for Tuesday, November 10th from noon to 1 p.m. It is being presented by Jen Urso, who led a webinar for us earlier this year. And the title is I Thought We Were Allies. So we'd love for you to join us as we wrap up excuse me, another great year of women-focused webinars. And then we'll be getting our act together and putting things on the calendar for 2027. So it's hard to believe I'm speaking about that, but it's happening and we got to get it going. So with that, if you do have a question, pop it in there. If not, thank you to all for joining us today. Enjoy the last few weeks of summer and have a great rest of your day. Thank you, everybody.